The sun has yet to clear the horizon, and London belongs to the ghosts of its past. A soft blue mist clings to the surface of the lake in St. James's Park, dampening the distant hum of the awakening city. Here, between the shadows of the ancient plane trees and the quiet ripple of the water, history feels tangible. We are standing at the heart of the British capital, but for a moment it feels like a secret garden. It is a time for observation, for breathing in the cool air, and for discovering the stories etched into these royal paths. So, shall we begin our walk into the light? London was not always a city of manicured lawns and grand architecture. Long before the tourists and the red buses, this land was a treacherous, low-lying marsh in the 12th century. It served a sombre and vital purpose, hosting a hospital for women suffering from leprosy. The hospital was dedicated to St. James the Less, which is where the park and the neighbouring palace eventually took their names. It was a place of total isolation, chosen specifically because it was far from the city walls, surrounded by the soggy floodplains of the Tyburn River. The Tyburn still flows today, though it is hidden beneath our feet, trapped in the darkness of the London sewer system. But back then, it was a wild stream that fed this swampy ground. Life here was difficult, and the landscape was dominated by reeds and mud. It is hard to imagine, as we stand on these dry, paved paths, that this was once considered a wasteland. However, everything changed when King Henry VIII turned his gaze toward the west. He was looking for a hunting ground, a place close to his residence at Whitehall, where he could chase deer without travelling too far. In 1532, he seized the land, dissolved the hospital, and enclosed the area as a royal deer park. He built a hunting lodge, which would later become St. James's Palace, and transformed a site of suffering into a private retreat for the crown. The transition from a leper colony to a royal playground was swift, but the marshy nature of the ground remained. For decades, it was a wild, unpolished forest. It wasn't until the reign of the Stuarts that the park began to take on a more formal shape. King James I, always a man of eccentric tastes, decided that a mere deer park was not enough. He wanted something more exotic. He drained parts of the swamp and installed a series of cages and enclosures, but what did he keep in this early version of a zoo? The records tell us he kept camels, elephants, and even crocodiles. It must have been a surreal sight for a 17th century Londoner to see a tropical beast emerging from the thick London fog. This was the beginning of the park's identity as a place of wonder, a tradition that continues to this very day. Walking through the park today, the most exotic thing you might see is a parakeet or a pelican. But imagine being a courtier in the early 1600s, walking these same paths and encountering an elephant. King James I was a man deeply fascinated by the natural world. He viewed St. James Park not just as a hunting ground, but as a living museum. His menagerie was one of the wonders of the age. He spent vast sums of money importing animals from the furthest reaches of the growing British trade routes. The crocodiles, kept in a specially heated tank near the water's edge, were a particular point of pride. They were a gift from a sea captain, and they represented the reach of the king's influence into the Americas and Africa. But the king's interests were not just animal, they were also industrial. If you look at the trees surrounding the park, you will see many varieties, but James was obsessed with one in particular, the mulberry tree. He ordered the planting of thousands of them, creating a vast mulberry garden at the western end of the park. His goal was to establish a domestic silk industry in England, rivaling that of France and Italy. He believed that if he could grow the trees, the silkworms would follow. However, history reveals a classic royal blunder. The king's agents accidentally imported black mulberry trees, which are hardy and produce delicious fruit, but are not the trees that silkworms prefer. The silkworms wanted the white mulberry. The silk industry failed spectacularly, but the trees remained. Some of the ancient mulberries in London today are direct descendants of that failed experiment. It is a reminder that even the grandest royal plans can be undone by a simple lack of botanical knowledge. As we walk, the mist softens the edges of the trees, making it easy to imagine those early days. The park was still a rough place, with dirt tracks and simple fences. It was a private world reserved for the king and his inner circle. The public were strictly excluded. It was a sanctuary for the crown, a place where a king could be a naturalist, away from the prying eyes of the city. But the park we see now, with its grand vistas and formal water features, owes its soul to a later king, a king who had spent years in exile and returned with a very different vision of what a royal park should be. In 1660, the monarchy was restored, and Charles II returned from France to take his throne. He had spent his years of exile at the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, and he had seen the breathtaking gardens of Versailles when he looked at the wild, marshy woods of Saint-Germain. He saw an opportunity to bring a touch of French elegance to London. He commissioned the legendary landscape architect André Lenotre to draft a plan. Lenotre was the master of the formal garden, a man who believed in symmetry, long perspectives, and the power of water. Under his influence, the park was transformed. The jagged, irregular ponds were drained and reshaped into a single, massive canal. It was nearly 800 yards long, a straight silver ribbon of water that reflected the sky. This was a radical change. It brought order to the chaos of the old marsh. But Charles II did something even more radical than changing the landscape. He opened the park to the public. This was a revolutionary act. For the first time, the common people of London could walk in the same space as their king. Of course, there were rules. You had to be decently dressed, and the gates were locked at night. But during the day, the park became the most fashionable place in the city. It was a theatre of social life. Charles himself could often be seen walking here, accompanied by his many spaniels. He loved to feed the ducks, a hobby that earned him the nickname of the Merry Monarch. He even built a special area called the decoy, where waterfowl were bred and kept. The atmosphere was one of calculated leisure. People came here to see and be seen, to gossip, and to catch a glimpse of the royal family. The canal was the centerpiece, but the paths around it were lined with rows of trees, creating shaded avenues for strolling. This French-inspired layout remained the heart of the park for over 150 years. It was a formal, rigid landscape, very different from the romantic, winding paths we see today. But why did it change? Why did the straight lines of the canal disappear? The answer lies in the shifting tastes of the 19th century, and the rise of a new architectural superstar who believed that nature should look, well, more natural. But before we get to that, we must meet the park's most famous residents. Residents who have been here since the time of Charles II and who still demand our attention every single morning. If you walk toward the eastern end of the lake, near Duck Island, you might see a sight that feels entirely out of place in northern Europe. A group of large prehistoric-looking birds with massive golden pouches. These are the pelicans of St. James Park. They are not just random visitors. They are a royal tradition that dates back over 350 years. It all began in 1664. A Russian ambassador sent by the Tsar arrived in London to present his credentials to King Charles II. Along with the usual diplomatic gifts of furs and gold, he brought a pair of great white pelicans. It was an extraordinary gesture at the time. Most Londoners had never seen a bird of such size or strange appearance. The king was delighted. He placed them in his new canal, and they immediately became a sensation. Since that day, there have almost always been pelicans in the park. The colony is maintained through gifts from other nations and occasional purchases to ensure the lineage continues. Today, the group consists of several individuals, each with their own distinct personality. There is a certain gravity to them as they sit motionless on the rocks. Waiting for the afternoon feeding at 2:30 in the afternoon every day, a park ranger arrives with a bucket of fresh fish, usually whiting or mackerel. It is one of the few times the birds show their true speed. They are remarkably long-lived, often reaching 30 or 40 years of age. Over the centuries, they have become the unofficial mascots of the park. There are even stories of them wandering out of the park and into the city. One pelican was famously spotted sitting on a park bench in central London, seemingly waiting for a bus. Another once flew over to the London Zoo, apparently deciding he preferred the company there, but they always seem to return to the lake. As the mist swirls around them this morning, they look like statues from a forgotten era. They are a living link to the 17th century, a remnant of the king's desire to fill his garden with the wonders of the world. But the lake they inhabit today is very different from the Strait Canal of 1664. To understand why, we have to look at the man who literally bent the water to his will, the architect John Nash. By the early 1800s, the formal French style of Charles II was starting to look outdated. The world was moving toward the picturesque, a movement in art and landscaping that valued emotion, mystery, and the imitation of nature. The man chosen to bring this vision to St. James's Park was John Nash, the favourite architect of King George IV. Nash was the man responsible for much of the grand face of Regency London, from Regent Street to the Brighton Pavilion. In 1827, he was given the task of completely reimagining the park. His first move was to destroy the straight lines of the old canal. He believed that water should look like a natural river, winding through the trees. He softened the edges, added islands, and created a series of curving paths that offered unexpected views at every turn. This was the birth of the park we see today. Nash wanted the visitor to feel as if they were in the middle of the countryside, even though they were just a few hundred yards from the bustling streets of Westminster. He planted thousands of new trees, including the weeping willows that now dip their branches into the water, but his most famous addition was the bridge. The original bridge was a simple wooden structure, but it served a vital purpose. It offered a vantage point that is now considered one of the most beautiful in all of London. If you stand in the centre of the current Blue Bridge today and look east, you see the fairy tale turrets of the Horse Guards Parade and Whitehall. If you look west, you see the grand facade of Buckingham Palace, framed by the trees. It is a view that Nash perfectly calculated. He understood that a park is not just a place to walk, it is a series of framed pictures. His redesign was not without controversy. However, it was incredibly expensive, and many people missed the old formal canal. But as the years passed, the new park became beloved. It felt softer, more accessible, and more quintessentially English. The mist this morning plays into Nash's hands perfectly. It hides the modern skyscrapers of the distant city, leaving only the silhouettes of the historic buildings he loved. As we cross the bridge, the sound of our footsteps on the wood is the only thing breaking the silence. We are walking through a 19th century painting, a masterpiece of urban planning that managed to bring the soul of the forest into the heart of the empire. But who lives in these waters now, beyond the Pelicans? The lake is a bustling metropolis of its own. The mist is lifting slightly, revealing the true scale of the avian population here. St. James's Park is a vital sanctuary for dozens of species of birds. It is one of the most biodiverse spots in the city centre. You will see the common residents first, the coots with their white frontal shields and the moorhens with their distinctive red beaks. They are the busybodies of the lake, constantly paddling through the reeds. But look closer, and you might see the more elegant inhabitants. The great crested grebe is a frequent visitor, known for its elaborate courtship dances and its ability to dive deep into the murky water in search of fish. Then there are the geese. The greylag geese are the most numerous, but the Egyptian geese with their dark eye patches and tan feathers are the most striking. They were originally introduced as ornamental birds, but they have thrived in London, becoming a permanent fixture of the landscape. The park's management takes bird conservation very seriously. Duck Island at the eastern end is a strictly protected area. It is a tangle of shrubs and trees where the birds can nest away from the prying eyes of humans and the reach of foxes. There is even a small cottage on the island, a picturesque 19th century structure that looks like something out of a storybook. It was originally built for the birdkeeper, and it still serves as a base for the rangers who look after the lake. The sheer variety of life here is a testament to the health of the park. You might see tufted ducks, potrids, and even the occasional black swan. The air is filled with a symphony of calls, from the high-pitched whistle of the widgeon to the deep honk of the geese. It is a reminder that London is not just a city of people, it is an ecosystem. As we walk along the water's edge, the birds seem largely indifferent to our presence. They have lived alongside Londoners for centuries, and they know that here, in this royal enclosure, they are safe. But as we turn away from the water and look toward the grand avenue that borders the park, the scale of our surroundings changes. We are leaving the intimacy of the lake and entering the ceremonial heart of the British capital. The Mall is waiting, and its history is as red as the asphalt that covers it. We step off the soft grass and onto the wide, imposing expanse of the Mall, even in the quiet of the morning. This road feels significant. It is the ceremonial backbone of London, the stage upon which the grandest events of the monarchy are performed. But why is it called the Mall? The name actually comes from a game. In the 17th century, paimai was a popular pastime, a bit like a mix between croquet and golf. Players would use a mallet to hit a wooden ball through a series of hoops. King Charles II was an avid player, and he had a long, straight alley constructed specifically for the game. Over time, the game faded into history, but the name the Mall stuck. The road we see today, however, is a much later creation. It was redesigned in the early 20th century as a grand memorial to Queen Victoria. The most striking thing about it is its colour. The asphalt is a deep rust red. This isn't an accident. It was designed to give the impression of a giant red carpet leading to Buckingham Palace. When seen from the air, or during a royal procession, the effect is magnificent. It creates a visual link between the green of the parks and the white stone of the palace. The road is lined with majestic plane trees, which provide a canopy that seems to tunnel toward the horizon. In the mist, the end of the Mall is invisible, making the road feel like it stretches on forever. On either side, we are flanked by history. To our left, the quiet beauty of St. James's Park. To our right, the grand facades of Carlton House Terrace and the various royal residences. This road has seen it all, from the celebration of coronations to the sombre processions of royal funerals. It is a place of deep national emotion. But in the early morning, it is a place for runners, for the occasional early taxi, and for the sound of the wind through the leaves. There is a strange peace here. The scale of the road is so vast that it makes the individual feel small, yet the symmetry of the design is deeply comforting. As we walk, we pass the various statues that guard the route. They are the silent witnesses to the passing of time. But what lies at the gateway to this grand avenue? To find out, we must look back toward the city, toward the massive stone arch that serves as the entrance to this royal world. Standing at the eastern end of the Mall is Admiralty Arch, a structure that radiates power and permanence. It was commissioned by King Edward VII as a tribute to his mother, Queen Victoria. He wanted a gateway that would match the grandeur of the new Mall and provide a fitting entrance to the ceremonial route. The architect, Sir Aston Webb, delivered a masterpiece of Edwardian Baroque. The arch is actually a curved building, housing offices that were once the headquarters of the Royal Navy. It features 3 massive arches. The central arch is only open for royal processions, a privilege reserved for the monarch and their household. The 2 outer arches are for the rest of us. If you look closely at the stonework, you will see incredibly detailed carvings of naval figures and symbols of the British Empire. But there is a quirk to this building that many people miss. On the wall of the northernmost arch, about 7 feet off the ground, there is a small stone nose. Yes, a human nose. For years it was a mystery. Some said it was a tribute to the Duke of Wellington, known for his prominent profile. Others believed it was a secret sign for the King's Guards. In reality, it was likely a bit of fun added by a sculptor during a restoration, but it has become part of the city folklore. Admiralty Arch marks the transition between the frantic energy of Trafalgar Square and the controlled elegance of the royal parks. Once you pass beneath it, the noise of the city seems to drop away. The arch acts as a sonic barrier, a stone wall that protects the quietude of the Mall. It is currently being transformed into a luxury hotel, but its facade remains unchanged, a sentinel at the start of our journey. The mist wraps around its columns this morning, making it look like a ghost of the Victorian era. It reminds us that London is a city of layers, where modern luxury lives inside the shells of imperial history. But as we move forward, our eyes are drawn to the golden figure rising in the distance. The Victoria Memorial is the heart of this landscape, and it tells a story of a woman who shaped an entire century. As we approach the end of the Mall, the Victoria Memorial rises out of the mist like a white mountain. This is not just a statue. It is a complex narrative in stone and bronze, completed in 1911. It stands 82 feet high and contains over 2,300 tons of white pentelic marble. At the very top, gilded in gold, is the figure of winged victory. She catches the first rays of the morning sun, shining even on a grey day like today. Below her sit the figures of constancy and courage. But the heart of the monument is the seated figure of Queen Victoria herself. She faces down the Mall, looking toward the city. She ruled for 63 years. She is surrounded by allegorical figures that represent the virtues her reign was said to embody: justice, truth, and charity. On the opposite side, facing the palace, is the figure of motherhood, a nod to the Queen's role as the grandmother of Europe. The scale is intentional. It was built at the height of the British Empire, and it was meant to project a sense of global reach and moral authority. The fountain at the base of the monument is filled with bronze figures of mermaids and sea creatures, celebrating Britain's naval power. If you walk around the memorial, you will see groups of statues representing the various industries of the era: agriculture, engineering, and commerce. It is a literal encyclopedia of Victorian values. But for the morning walker, the memorial is a place of rest. The steps are a popular spot to sit and watch the light change over the palace. The white marble has a luminous quality. Even in the mist, it seems to glow. It acts as a focal point for the entire mall, drawing the eye forward. But, as grand as the memorial is, it is merely the prologue to the main event. Behind the white stone and the golden wings lies the most famous residence in the world. Buckingham Palace is finally coming into view, its long grey facade emerging from the fog. It is a building that has become a symbol of the nation itself. But did you know that it was not always a palace? Its history is one of constant transformation, driven by the whims and the debts of the kings who lived there. In the early 1700s, if you were standing exactly where we are now, you would not see a palace. You would see a large, elegant, but relatively modest red brick house. This was Buckingham House, built for the Duke of Buckingham in 1703. It was a private home, surrounded by gardens and the remnants of King James mulberry trees. In 1761, King George III bought the house for his wife, Queen Charlotte. He wanted a comfortable, quiet retreat away from the formal duties of St. James Palace. For many years it was known simply as the Queen's House. It was here that most of their 15 children were born, however. When their son, George IV, came to the throne, comfortable and modest were not in his vocabulary. He was a man of legendary extravagance. He decided to turn the house into a palace. He once again called upon John Nash, the same man who redesigned the park. Nash spent years and a staggering amount of taxpayer money expanding the building. He added 3 wings around a central courtyard and faced the whole thing in honey-coloured Bath stone. But George IV died before the work was finished, and his successor, William IV, actually hated the place. He was so unimpressed by the palace that when the Houses of Parliament burned down in 1834, he offered the palace as a permanent replacement for the government. Thankfully, they turned him down. It was not until the young Queen Victoria moved in 1837 that Buckingham Palace finally became the official royal residence. She found it far from perfect. It was cold, the chimneys smoked, and there was not enough room for her growing family. It was Victoria who commissioned the final, most famous addition, the East Front. This is the part of the palace we see today, the facade that faces the Mall. It was built to enclose the courtyard and provide more living space. The architect, Edward Blore, created the long wing that includes the famous central balcony. It is strange to think that the most iconic part of the palace was essentially an afterthought, a solution to a lack of bedrooms. As the mist drifts across the facade, the building looks solid, eternal. But it is a jigsaw puzzle of different eras and different kings, and, just like the park, it hides its own secret garden. Behind the high stone walls and the wrought iron gates of Buckingham Palace lies a world that very few people ever get to see. This is the Palace Garden, 42 acres of private parkland in the middle of one of the busiest cities on Earth. It is the largest private garden in London, and it is a masterpiece of biodiversity. While we cannot walk through it this morning, we can imagine its quietude. It features a 3-acre lake, complete with a waterfall and an island that provides a safe haven for nesting birds. The garden is most famous for the royal garden parties, where thousands of guests are invited to walk the lawns and take tea with the monarch. But on a morning like this, it is silent. The garden is home to the National Collection of mulberries, a direct link back to King James I's failed silk experiment. Some of these trees are incredibly old, their twisted trunks supported by wooden crutches. There is also a helicopter landing pad, a tennis court where King George VI used to play, and a summer house that dates back to the 18th century. The garden is managed with a focus on wildlife. It has its own beehives, which produce honey for the royal household, and a vast array of wild flowers that are allowed to grow in designated meadows. It is a self-contained ecosystem, a green lung that helps the city breathe. From our vantage point on the mall, we can only see the tops of the tallest trees peeking over the palace roof, but their presence is felt. The air here feels fresher, cooler. The garden acts as a buffer, protecting the palace from the noise and pollution of the surrounding streets. It is a reminder that the monarchy has always sought a connection to the land, even in the heart of the metropolis. As we turn our back on the palace and look toward the north, we see another expanse of green. This is Green Park. It is the third of the central royal parks, and it has a character that is entirely its own. It is simpler, more rugged, and it holds a curious legend about a queen, a king, and a lack of flowers. If you look across at Green Park, you will notice something immediately. Unlike St. James Park, there are no formal flower beds, no neatly arranged tulips or carefully trimmed rose bushes. It is almost entirely made up of grass and trees. There is a famous legend that explains why. It is said that in the 17th century, Queen Catherine of Braganza, the wife of Charles II, caught her husband picking flowers in the park for another woman. In a fit of jealous rage, she ordered that every single flower in the park be removed, and that no more should ever be planted. Whether the story is true or not, the tradition has stuck. To this day, the only flowers you will see in Green Park are the millions of daffodils that carpet the ground in the spring. For the rest of the year, it is a sea of green. This gives the park a very different feeling. It feels more like a fragment of the ancient English countryside that has somehow survived the expansion of the city. The park was originally a swampy burial ground for lepers from the hospital at St. James, but it was enclosed as a royal park in 1668. It was a popular spot for jewels and firework displays in the 18th century. One of the most famous paths in London runs along its southern edge, Constitution Hill. The name's origin is debated. Some say it refers to King Charles II's habit of taking a daily walk here for his constitution or health. Others say it refers to the 17th century political struggles over the British Constitution. Regardless, it is a road with a dramatic history. It was the site of no fewer than 3 assassination attempts on Queen Victoria, in 1841, 1842, and 1849. Various individuals fired pistols at the Queen's carriage as she travelled up this hill. Miraculously, she was never harmed. She reportedly remained remarkably calm, often insisting on completing her journey to show that she would not be intimidated. As we walk along the edge of the park, the mist clings to the mature lime and plane trees. The ground here is uneven, hiding the fact that the River Tyburn still flows deep underground, making its way toward the Thames. Green Park is a place of transit, a green bridge between the palace and the grand houses of Piccadilly. It is the quietest of the parks, a place where the city history is buried deep beneath the turf. But as we reach the end of the hill, we are met by a final massive monument to Britain's military past. Standing at the top of Constitution Hill is the Wellington Arch. Built in the 1820s, it was originally intended as a grand entrance to London from the west. Atop the arch sits a massive bronze statue of a quadriga, a 4-horse chariot driven by the Angel of Peace. It is the largest bronze sculpture in Europe, and it is a powerful sight as it emerges from the morning mist. The arch was originally built to commemorate the victories of Britain in the Napoleonic Wars. For many years, it stood directly opposite the London home of the Duke of Wellington, Apsley House. This grand mansion is still known by its historic address, number 1, London, at the time. It was the first house you would encounter after passing the toll gates into the city. The Duke of Wellington, the hero of Waterloo, was a towering figure in British life, and this corner of London is a monument to his legacy. But the Arch has not always been here. In the 1880s, due to increasing traffic at Hyde Park Corner, the entire structure was dismantled and moved to its current location. It was a massive engineering feat. When it was rebuilt, the original, somewhat controversial statue of the Duke of Wellington was removed and replaced with the current quadriga. Today, the Arch is a landmark that millions of people pass every day, but few stop to appreciate its detail. In the quiet of the dawn, you can see the intricate carvings of shields and weapons that celebrate the peace won on the battlefield. As we stand here, we have reached the end of our royal path. Behind us, the mall and the parks are waking up. The mist is finally beginning to burn off, revealing the gold and stone of the city in all its glory. We have walked through nearly 1,000 years of history, from a leper's marsh to the heart of a global empire. London is a city that never stops changing, yet it holds onto its past with a fierce pride. These parks are its memory, its lungs and its soul. As the first buses begin to rumble past and the volume of the city begins to rise, we can take this moment of peace with us. The historic paths are still there, waiting for the next person to walk them and discover their secrets. Thank you for joining me on this quiet, misty walk through the heart of historic London. From the silent lake of St. James's to the grand gates of Buckingham Palace, we have shared a side of the city that few get to experience in the rush of the day. If you enjoyed this journey into the calm, please consider subscribing to our channel. We have many more stories to tell and many more paths to walk together, from the hidden corners of Europe to the bustling streets of Asia. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and find your own moments of peace in the world around you. Goodbye for now.